Have you ever walked into a room and felt instantly uplifted and calmed, but you couldn't quite put your finger on why? Well, the chances are it's all in the paint. Whether you're looking to sell your home or just give it a fresh new look, today's podcast of Realty Bytes, Conversations on Real Estate and Lifestyle, is the one that you absolutely won't want to miss. We've got the insider tips that will help you paint like a pro. Now, we all know that a fresh coat of paint can completely transform a space. It can make a room feel brand new. It can set the mood, and let's be honest, it can even bump up the value of your home. But with so many colors, finishes, and techniques out there, where do you even start? That's why today I've invited an expert in the field, Arran McDonald of Hecra Painting. Arran and his team have had years of experience in painting homes to sell and painting homes to live in. And today, Arran is here to share all the ins and outs of the trade. Today we have a lot to explore, the tips and the tricks and the processes and the impact of color choices to the often overlooked little details and things like undertones. If you're curious about what shades will be all the rage, we've got that covered too. All right, enough of all this chit chat. Let's dive in. I'm super excited to introduce our guru for all things paint. Please welcome Arran from Hecra Painting. Arran, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Evelyn.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. I know that you are a wealth of information. Hopefully you can shed some light on painting and how homeowners can improve their property. So before we get into all of the nitty-gritty things, maybe you could share a little bit about yourself and how you got into the painting business.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think the first thing to touch on would be the business name. I get a lot of questions about the business name. It's definitely not, a normal word that is used. So I struggled for a long time about picking the business name, went back and forth with a couple different names. Ultimately, I ended up settling on Hecra. Basically, the name comes from both of my parents' names, Heather and Craig. I kind of just combined the two. And now it finally stuck. So that's something that I struggled with for a long time, but we finally set on that. And we've been with that name for about 4 years now. But yeah, painting was something that came to me during university. So I was actually in Ottawa at Carleton University. And then I started painting in the summers for one of my brother-in-law's friends. At the beginning, I knew absolutely nothing about painting. Didn't know a single thing. But through working with them, I fell in love with it. Seeing them provide value to their clients, making things easier, eliminating stress, all those types of things. I always had a passion for business. I didn't really know what type of business I wanted to get into. I tried to get into marketing early on when I was young, didn't really work out. And then the painting thing came across my table and I kind of just ran with it. So I started painting with them for about 2 years. And then while I was in school, I actually started doing a few jobs on my own. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And I've been doing it ever since. And that was about in 2015. So I've been doing it for about 8 years now.
Right. That's great. It's a great entrepreneurial story. And so what areas do you actually service with your painting business?
Yeah, so that's something that as of right now, it's a pretty broad area. A lot of our clients are in different areas throughout the GTA. So, we go as far west as Hamilton. We'll go north. We've been up to Collingwood and stuff like that. And we also go to the East End as well. So it's pretty broad. Our shop is in Caledon, so that's kind of our main focal point. But again, we service pretty much all around the GTA.
Okay. Now, I know that you work with both homeowners on their own and you work with several realtors as well, correct? And you do both inside and outsides of properties. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what types of services specifically related to painting that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was lucky enough that multiple of my friends have parents that are realtors, including you. So when I first started painting, working with realtors was actually something that really got me off my feet. So I did a lot of work for realtors. So that's something we specialize in. I've obviously had to learn to understand that it's a stressful process, whether they're buying or purchasing a home. And the painting process does not need to add to that stress. So that's something that I've really tried to focus on, making that process as easy as possible. But yeah, we do interior painting, exterior painting, and then cabinet refinishing. So any older cupboards, stuff like that, we can refinish as well. That's something that we specialize in. And yeah, we pretty much just try to stick to those three things. Get really good at them, get efficient at them, eliminate any questions or things that can go wrong just because we have a really good knowledge base in those specific areas. So yeah, that's what we focus in.
Okay. And when you are actually working with a client, one of the things that they're always worried about is the mess that it's going to make, the inconvenience that it's going to cause. So, what types of things do you do to properly prepare the room for when you are going to do a paint job?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it all starts at the very beginning through communication with the client. So depending on the type of the scope of work, some jobs are messier than others. And then depending on the living situation as well, there's factors that we need to take into consideration. So I think communicating up front is good. If it's the type of thing where, say, they're selling the home, I always recommend that we're going to bring in a cleaning contractor at the end of the project just to make sure that everything is perfectly clean and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual project, obviously, there's no point in freshening up your walls or your ceilings or things like that if you're going to ruin things like your floors or other parts of the house. So that's definitely a huge part of the process. It's kind of cliche to say, but everyone always talks about how painting is 80% prep work, but it really is, because other than that, you're going to be creating more work for yourself or you're going to be damaging other parts of your home, which we obviously don't want to do. So yeah, typically what would happen is we would talk about furniture. Ideally, in these real estate type projects, we've run into a lot of situations where we have the chance where the home is empty. That's obviously ideal, but it's not always possible. So we talk about different things, obviously delicate items and things like that. We ask the homeowner to remove ahead of time. Bigger furniture items, obviously our team can help to be able to move those to the middle of the room, and then we'll put plastic over top of that. Flooring, anything like that, obviously gets fully protected with either drop cloths or plastic. And yeah, we pretty much make sure everything's fully protected before painting.
Right. And so when you're painting and somebody asks you to come and do a job, is there a difference between you actually doing the prepping of the walls? Is that automatically included? Or if they just say, I want my walls painted, that's one price. If I want my walls prepped and painted, that's another price, or is it all together? How does that part of it work?
Yeah, it's a great question. Typically, we like to take care of everything. The reason that we do that is just so that we're controlling all the variables and we're making sure that, depending on what you were to clean your walls with or stuff like that, it could affect the painting process. On top of that, obviously adding any extra little bits of work to, the homeowner's plate during that time can add that little bit of extra stress trying to get prepared for us. So we try to make it as seamless as possible. And then it also eliminates any of those extra variables. If you clean your walls with the wrong product and then our paint isn't adhering properly, that's going to be a whole new mess that we have to deal with. So yeah, typically our painting process is full service. We take care of everything. And yeah.
Okay. So in terms of your business, what sets you apart from other painters that are in the marketplace?
Absolutely. I think it's my consultative approach. I really try to understand the project. I try to understand the goals of the client. And then I try to match up my knowledge of painting and all that type of stuff to that. It's very easy for a painter to tell you they're going to paint a room, but I really try to understand why, what's the goal, what are we trying to achieve with that? Because the project can change drastically based on those factors. So that's something that I really try to focus on is really understanding what you're trying to do, where you want to get it to, and I want to understand that the best way that I can. So I think that definitely sets us apart. Communication, obviously, as well. It's something that, every morning and every evening we're communicating with our clients. We're making sure that they're up to date on what's happening. Things don't always go 100% smooth. So, that's something that, again, we're communicating constantly. We're updating them so they're always in the loop, just again, so we're not adding any extra stress or anything like that.
Right. And, whether you're looking to paint your house because you're looking to stage it, or maybe you're looking to paint your house to give it a fresh new feel, you're going to continue to live there. So it's more for that interior design. A fresh coat of paint can really make a world of difference. Now, for sellers, it's often the first thing that buyers are going to notice in your house as they walk in is the walls fresh and clean. If it is, it shows or at least implies that the homeowner is taking good care of the property. If the walls are banged up, that's a whole different perception that they get of the house, as well as color. So the color that you use affects our emotion, right? So you often think of colors like yellow as happy colors. Now, we don't want to paint our walls yellow, but at the same time, we don't want to paint our walls necessarily dark, drab colors as well, right? So we want to look at what's the feel, the overall feel that we want to have in the property, and then paint accordingly. So how important do you feel that paint colors are in terms of the overall appearance of a home? Starting from the outside, maybe some of the things that you tackle, moving on through to the inside, and then maybe talking about some of the special projects that you do, such as refinishing kitchen cabinets, bathroom cabinets, how paint can really change the whole look of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the first things to touch on would be nowadays when people are looking at homes and things like that, they're doing it online, right? So they're going to be looking through several different homes. And the first thing that they're going to see is that first photo of the exterior of the home. So that first impression is massive, right? So whether, it's something that, is inviting, it's fresh, that's going to be important. The other thing that first comes to mind as well is how many projects that we've done with you where after that paint color has changed or that work has been done, a lot of the times the homeowners don't even recognize their own home and they feel so much better immediately in it themselves. So the value is obviously there, and color is huge, right? You want it to be bright, but you also want it to be warm and inviting as well. And especially, you want it to be a blank canvas that someone can visualize themselves being in, with their decor and things like that. So that's why you want to stick away from, drastic colors or things that, maybe aren't neutral. But yeah, color is obviously massive.
Right. So in terms of the outside, I know that you do different things, like you can paint garage doors, you can paint front doors, you can paint even brickwork, right? So maybe you want to touch on some of the different components of the exterior of the house that you do cover.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important. A lot of our clients obviously have initial feelings about painting the outside of their house. They're not sure how long it's going to last. They're unsure of all those types of factors. You can paint pretty much every substrate on the outside of your home. You just have to do it properly. So again, it comes back to the prep work, comes back to the proper preparation ahead of painting, and it also comes down to the types of products that are being used. So, there's going to be different products for brick. There's going to be different products for aluminum siding to vinyl siding and all those sorts of factors. So again, that's something that we're going to explain to you. We're going to explain to the process of how we're going to do things. We're going to give you an idea of how long you should expect it to last and all those factors. Yeah, that's something that we go through with our clients, from start to finish.
Right. And you also do things like decking, correct? Painting decking, painting fencing as well. Now, when you're painting on the exterior of the property, obviously you're not going to do it when it's raining, but are there any other constraints in terms of exterior temperatures?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So yeah, like rain is obviously one massive issue. You don't want to be painting in the rain, but direct sunlight is also a massive issue. So if you have direct sunlight on a substrate, that can cause issues during the painting process as well. We have devices like moisture meters, things like that, to be able to mitigate any of those risks. But again, obviously that comes down to our expertise. It's day to day. The weather can be very inconsistent. So that's something that we're constantly looking at. And then again, back to the communication, making sure that our client's in the loop of what's going on without sacrificing any quality or longevity in the project.
Okay, so if somebody wants to put their house up for sale and it's January the 1st, and I go to the house and I see this really ugly front door color, I'll often want them to paint it. But can you actually paint their front door when it's like sub-zero weather? Or does it have to be 68 degrees or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, so there are products that are built to be applied in cooler temperatures. Is it ideal? No. But there is products that are made to be put on in negative weather. So it's definitely something that can be done. A front door is something that we probably would take on during a period like that, but we're not going to be painting the exterior brick on your home or anything that's that type of size. But the front door would definitely be something that we could do. And the other thing is most of the time it opens into the house, so there's a little bit more warmth there as you're painting it. So yeah, that's something that we would definitely be able to do with the right products.
Okay, that's really good to know, because I've often been to a home where the front door is just either really damaged or the colors not very good, and I wasn't aware that you could do that in colder weather. So that's great. Now, in terms of coming to the inside of the home, we obviously have the walls. There are different types of wall materials. So there's drywall, there's plaster in old homes. Can you do both types of painting?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is good advice for any professional painter, but it's also good advice for any homeowner. Anytime you're going to paint something, it's always good to do a little test area in any of the areas just to confirm that the paint's going to adhere properly to whatever substrate you're completing. With walls, there is certain things like if you see super glossy walls, that could be an indication that it's painted with an old oil paint. In that situation, you're going to need a specific primer to be able to bond to that. So yeah, we definitely have little steps that we go through to ensure that, the paint's going to adhere properly and we're not going to have any issues that way.
Right. Okay, that's a really good point to make, especially in older homes. And I guess the same thing when you're painting ceilings when they're stucco, right? Because some of the older paint that they used on those ceilings might be a little bit harder to adhere to. And some of them have a lot of layers because they've done it so many times, right?
And another
Um,
one would be actually if the stucco ceiling hasn't been painted, that can actually bring issues because basically if the stucco painting hasn't been sealed or hasn't been painted, it hasn't been sealed properly. So if you use a water-based paint on that stucco ceiling, the stucco will actually start to fall down on you. And that can
hmm,
create massive issues and a huge mess for you.
right. So you really need to think about all these little tips when you are doing a painting job, whether you're doing it
Absolutely, or
as
else
a
you start running
homeowner
into
or
yeah, or else you start running into more issues and things like that, and that's obviously not what you want during a process like this.
okay. So you also touched upon the fact that you can do cabinets. Now, sometimes when we go into old cabinets, they do have like a glossy finish. So are you able to do all types of cabinets? Do they have to be wood? Could they be made of other types of surfaces? Or is it only wood cabinets that you can paint over?
Yeah, great question. So luckily we've done hundreds and hundreds of kitchens. So we've pretty much seen it all. There's not too many kitchens that something comes across where we haven't seen it before. So with the glossy finish, it could be painted with a solvent-based coating from the past, but our cabinet process is much more extensive than our regular painting process. So yeah, we put them through a very extensive process that starts with cleaning, then it's going to get a proper bonding primer. It gets 4 coats of paint, so it really goes through a full process to ensure that it's going to stick properly. And then obviously it's going to look and feel the way it's supposed to look. But yeah. And then the other thing is now a lot of doors have the plastic thermofoil material on it. So we actually use a heat gun to be able to remove that. Typically under those thermofoil is MDF, which is actually a very paintable surface. So we've actually done 2 this week where we removed that plastic coating and then we painted on top of the MDF and it came out to a great finish.
Right. And often that kind of plastic coating over the years, if especially if it's over like a stove or where people have had a kettle or a toaster, it starts actually cracking and peeling away. So that's good to know that you can remove that. And I know that you've done quite a few kitchen makeovers for clients of mine in the past, and it totally looks amazing. And I think part of that process is you take the doors off, you remove all of the hardware on the doors, and then you take them somewhere and they're sprayed, right? So it's not painting it with a brush, so that when it's finished, it really looks professional. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, what happens is all the doors and drawers get taken down, removed. They go to our shop. That also eliminates a massive part of the project happening in the customer's home, which is obviously ideal. Less mess, less things like that. So the doors and drawers go to the shop. They get completed there. The on-site stuff does get painted in the home, but it's limited to about 2 days of work. So that's obviously awesome. And yeah,
Okay. Now, what are some of the most common mistakes that you've seen when people are trying to paint their own homes?
so 2 pet peeves for me, and I've walked through obviously a ton of different homes. One would be not taking, it's a very simple one, but not taking off the cover plates. So in my eyes, seeing paint on those cover plates is just something that right away, even if you had a prospective client walking through that home, that does tell them something about the home. And another one is not painting closets. So again, when you walk into a room and it has a nice, bright, warm paint color, they're very happy with the feeling in the room. And then they open up that closet and, it's a dark brown still or something like that. It's a small detail, but I think it does say a lot about the home and what they're potentially buying. So that's something that I would definitely say is it does take a little bit more time to do those things. But again, it provides a lot of value in the long run.
Right. And I think what that demonstrates to potential home buyers is that it wasn't a quick fix up job, that the work
Absolutely.
was done properly and, with pride of home ownership. I know years ago, a painter had suggested to me a tip for painting. When you're painting your house, and I'm going to just throw a color, let's say they do want to do the walls a blue, and then they get to the
Yep.
closets. If you paint your closets an off white or a white, we'll call it white, then you don't have to paint it every time you paint the room. Because there's some people, like my daughter, for example, who likes to paint her room every couple of years a totally different feel. So by having the closet all white, it's much easier just to do the walls, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's a great tip. I think that if, you were to walk through a room and it was blue and then you were to go into the closet and it's a nice bright white, that's a totally different feel. To me, that's intentional and absolutely in terms of switching the colors in the rooms all the time and having to do that in the closet, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, I think that's a great tip.
Right. And the white in the closet just makes it look clean and fresh and brighter, like a brighter closet,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And what about in terms of a pet peeve? And one of my pet peeves is when I go to a house and I see that they've painted the walls, but they've painted the ceilings too because they haven't got straight edges. Can you speak
Yeah.
to
So
that?
with that, I see a lot of stuff kind of within the paint community about tape. Tape has this negative kind of aura around it that you shouldn't use it. In my opinion, and even us day to day, we use a lot of tape. Don't be afraid to use tape. It is your friend. It will help you. And it usually, there's no human in the world that can provide as straight of a line as tape can. So again, tape is your friend. It's my pet peeve when people try to avoid using tape. I think it ends with a more professional result. So use your tape.
And what are some tips that maybe you could provide about using tape? Like when do you take it off? Is it when the paint is totally dry, when it's partially dry? Because I've seen, and even myself, I've used tape in the past, and then I take it off and the paint seeps underneath. So what can you do to stop that?
Absolutely. I would be lying if I said that it isn't difficult. It can be tedious to use tape for sure. The biggest thing is using the right kind of tape. So there's a company called Frog Tape that provides exceptional tape. It's definitely more expensive, but the results speak for themselves. Another thing is always to get a wet rag. And after you've taped off a surface, use the wet rag to wet the top of the tape. That's actually going to activate the adhesive in the tape to be able to seal that edge better than it would be without the wet edge. So that's a massive little tip for someone as well. It's really going to be able to seal that so you'll have less bleed through.
Okay. All right. And so when you actually meet a potential client, whether it's a homeowner looking to sell or a homeowner who's looking to decorate their home, they are two very different, I think, consultations. So for someone
Absolutely.
who's looking to sell their home, one of the big questions is what color should I choose to paint? Maybe you can shed some light on that. I have my own opinions, but I'm curious as to what you would have to say.
Absolutely. So choosing colors is something that is a sensitive topic for me. At the beginning of my painting career, I used to help choose colors all the time. And then I realized that it's a very subjective thing. Obviously, we work with color all the time. So we have general colors that are popular that we know that work in multiple different spaces. So there's definitely, I can give advice in that type of sense. But I always recommend to use an interior designer. Paint stores in your community actually will have designers on staff that are completely free to use. So that's a huge tip in terms of color is to be able to go into the paint store, speak with them, tell them what you're painting, maybe provide them with some photos of the rooms that you're looking to paint, and they'll be able to give you a really good idea of the kind of direction that you want to go.
Right. I think that's a great tip, especially the photos, because if you just say, I want to paint my living room, it's hard for them to select. And so I think one of the things I do when I suggest colors to my clients is I'm looking at, what their hard surfaces are. What is the things that they're not changing, like their carpeting, if they have carpeting, what color is it? What about their flooring and their tiles? Do their tiles, is it kind of a whitey color? Is it a creamy color? Is it a warm undertone, a cool undertone? You don't want to have something with a warm undertone, which would be more like your yellows, and then put a cool color on the wall. We talk about white a lot when we're talking about painting to stage the home. And it's not just white. So you're not getting, a can of just plain white paint. The white there's so many different whites, and they all have an undertone to it. So you want to look at that. So I think your suggestion of bringing a picture to the paint store or to a designer, they're going to look at that and then help you pick something that will go with that space. Having said that as well, I think when you're quoting for a paint job, if every room is a different color of white and they're looking to just sell, I would assume that that's going to cost more than if you were to paint everything in the house one consistent color throughout, correct?
Absolutely. So yeah, anytime you're working with multiple different colors, whether they're very similar to each other or different, that brings in a whole new element of labor. It also brings in more costs. So your material wastage is going to go up because you're not using that single gallon of paint or whatever it is. And then every time we switch from color to color, we have to clean out our materials, which obviously takes time. And we also have to switch to different rollers and things like that. So in terms of cost efficiency, if you are, say, selling your home or something like that, I definitely try to advise them to stick to one color. And most of the time, too, that makes it really easy on the stagers or anyone else involved in the project in terms of decor and things like that. It just makes the process more simple.
Right. And I think once you pick a color that kind of goes throughout the home, then what you are using to create color in terms of the mood for a specific room would be your accent pieces, things like pillows, throws, decorative art pieces on the wall, or even decorative pieces that are on tabletops or cabinetry. But by having that blank canvas, when the home buyer comes in, they can envision their own belongings in that space. They might see your space with accents of, say, blue or something, but maybe they've got grays or greens. And if the walls are neutral, they can still bring their color in there and make it their own space. So that's a great tip as well. So what is typically involved when you paint? So who goes to get the paint, for example? Is the homeowner going to get the paint and the brushes? Do you take care of that? Who is covering the furniture? Maybe you can speak a little to that part of the process.
Absolutely. So I'm open to anything. Again, when I initially meet with a client, it's a conversation. Typically, we take care of purchasing the paint, purchasing all of our stuff, anything to do with the painting project. Typically, we take care of just because that usually makes things easier on both us and the customer. It also allows us to use our contractor discounts at our specific places. That obviously helps with cost efficiency as well. But yeah, there is clients that I've had in the past that want to purchase their own paint. That's obviously perfectly okay too. So yeah, I'm open to all of it, but obviously doing it ourselves makes it easier on us, and it also makes it easier on the client.
Right. And I think for me, if I had a contractor, I'd want him to do it all. I just want to come and see the finished product.
There's nothing worse too. Like if we need an extra gallon of paint and that's because we didn't purchase enough, then it's on us to go out to the store and get that extra gallon, right? Where say a homeowner purchased 4 gallons and we do need another gallon, now I got to go to them and take time out of their day to get that extra gallon. It's an inconvenience.
Mm-hmm. Right. So how long does it typically take to paint a room or a house? I know it's going to depend on how big the house or the room is, but typically, is there would you say it takes longer to do a kitchen, or is it longer to do a living room, or does it depend on other things within that room?
Yeah, for sure. So there is many variables that go into it, but typically we try to keep our projects to about a week. We can up our crew size if the project's a little bit bigger to be able to be in there for the week, just because we don't want to be in someone's home too long. It's an inconvenience. Even if they like us a lot, I know they don't want us in their home every single day. So we try to keep obviously the project time as little as possible, but obviously still, making sure that the project's done properly and that things are done. Obviously, we're not magicians. We can't just make things, turn a different color and get all that work done overnight. But it is something that we take very serious to be efficient and timely.
Okay. And if someone was thinking about doing a project, I know obviously you're always working with the contractor's availability. How far in advance should they contact you about having a project done? And typically, what is your turnaround if they do want to have something done right away?
Absolutely. Great question. As soon as possible is always the best answer. I know that sometimes that's not always the case, especially if you are thinking of selling your home. Painting is probably not the first thing on your priority list of things to do. So we understand that, that can happen as well. We get reached out to sometimes, or maybe something has to be painted in 2 weeks. That's something that we obviously have to look at our schedule, look at our crews, see if it's possible. If it's not, it's not. But we always try to help our clients if we can, especially when they're coming from realtors like you that obviously we've worked with for many years. We definitely want to make things happen in those tight timelines if we need to. But obviously having as much time as possible so we can have a really good plan in place and just make sure that there's no added stress or things like that.
Right. And I would say a tip, like, because you said that when you are putting your house up for sale, there is a lot of things to do. Like your realtor or your interior stager may say to you, you need to declutter this room, take this stuff out, blah, blah, blah. But while you're doing that, you could at the very beginning still get the painter like yourself in there to take a look at the project, to go through some colors and exactly what you want to have painted. Is it just the wall? Is it the wall and the trims? Is the ceiling going to be a part of it? Is it the whole house, part of the room? So that you can kind of judge how much time you need. And then they can schedule it too, I would think. So they might say, for the next 2 weeks, I'm having you in here now, Arran, but I'm not going to be ready to paint for 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks. But then you can schedule it out. And then as the time gets a little bit closer, nail it down. Is that
Absolutely.
kind of right how it works?
Absolutely. On their end, it's definitely going to provide more of a schedule for them. They can start to take a look at everything from a more macro kind of viewpoint where, okay, we have to get painting done, but we also need to make sure that we get the house cleaned. We also need to make sure that we get the house staged. And that can be a lot if you're doing it in a short period of time. So if you are thinking of selling or anything like that, it's always good. Like you said, I can come out 3, 4, 5, 6 months before we do the project and we can go over all of those details and it's not going to hurt, right? You're going to have more information. I'm going to be able to give you a rough timeline. So now okay, we don't only need a week for this. We might need 2 weeks because the project is bigger and all of that information is going to be valuable for them and me.
Right. So I know you leave the paint colors to the designers, but are there certain colors that you find designers are using quite a bit today when they're getting ready to, let's talk about staging a house?
Absolutely. So, the off-white family is super popular right now. The one that I see the most is probably simply white. I have used it hundreds and hundreds of times, and it looks great every time. So that's a color that I'm confident saying it is going to work in most scenarios. Another one would be agreeable gray. So sometimes when you look at a painting project, painting something white, actually, if the walls are already dark, it's going to cost more to paint something white. Sometimes it still makes sense to do that if you're going for an overall look, but sometimes you want to go with a color with a little bit more pigment in it that's going to get better coverage. Something like agreeable gray from Sherwin-Williams. It's still going to be bright and it's still going to be neutral, but it's going to only take 2 coats of paint, which can help with the cost efficiency. So that's something that if the budget's super tight, I would probably recommend to go something like that instead of one of those off-whites, just because the labor can be pretty intensive for some of the off-white painting.
Okay. And if you have super dark walls, would you be like, let's just go really dark, like black, and they want to go from black to white. Are you going to need to prime that wall first?
Absolutely. So primer's cheap, right? The price per gallon for primer is substantially less than it would be for regular paint. And there's no paint on the market that's going to cover a black wall to white in just 2 coats. It's going to take 3 to 4 coats for sure. So we always put down at least 1 coat of primer, sometimes 2, just to get that base coat down. And then from there, we'll move to our actual paint.
Right. Okay. And what are some quick and affordable painting fixes that homeowners can do to improve their home's appeal?
Absolutely. So I think the front door is one of the most important ones. It's a small project. They can do it themselves if they have a little bit of extra time, and it's something that's manageable. And the value and the impact is massive. It's the first thing that someone's going to see when they walk up those steps to the home. So the front door is definitely something that I recommend, along with the garage doors as well. That's something that's a smaller project. It can provide a lot of value to the curb appeal to the home. And again, it's manageable for someone to do. On the interior, it becomes a little bit tougher, but obviously you want to prioritize the rooms that are used the most, right? Your living space, your kitchen, rooms like that on the main floor. That's where I would focus my priorities if we were kind of picking and choosing and trying to be strategic about it.
Right. I would agree with you there. Kitchens, living rooms or family rooms, hallways potentially, master bedrooms and bathrooms. If you had a limited budget, that's probably what I'd want to make sure that really stands out. And you're right about the front door, because what people don't realize is not only the front door, one of the first things you see from the curb, right? So as they're driving up, you're looking at the house and either the front door says welcome or whoa, go away, right? But as the agent and the buyer are approaching the house, the agent is usually opening the lockbox located at the front door. That takes a little while. So as they're standing at the front door, the buyers are looking not only at the house and the neighborhood, but they're looking at the front door. Is it clean? Is it all scuffed up and marked? So it is a place where they're spending time just kind of in anticipation of what's going to follow. So it's that first impression. We know first impressions come about within 3 to 5 seconds of someone looking at a space. So we definitely want to put our best foot forward. So that's a great tip, Arran. And how should homeowners prepare their home for painting? So maybe you can talk about different paint finishes, like whether you should use flat on trim or on walls or things like that.
Absolutely. So yeah, sheens is a big one, right? You can pick the best colors in the world. You can pick, a full project scope to paint the entire house. But if you don't pick the proper sheens, it can massively impact the project. And a lot of times it can provide more issues. I'll tell you a funny story. When I first started painting and I didn't have as much knowledge about sheens, I painted one bedroom for a family friend of mine. And going into the room, I walked in there and there wasn't very much imperfections on the walls. There wasn't things that I could see that were really sticking out. I filled a little minor few things and I took care of those. And then I began to paint. What I didn't know is back then that I picked a paint that was actually a satin finish, which usually would be used on trim work. And I was applying it to the walls. And that extra sheen provides a lot more visibility to these imperfections. So after my first coat of paint, I started looking around and I started seeing way more imperfections than I did when I was in there originally. And that wasn't because of the work that I was doing. It was literally just that decision picking the improper sheen. So typically what we like to do is on ceilings, we're always going to pick flat. Ceilings are something that are not going to be touched a lot. So we want to hide the imperfections. A lot of the times on ceilings, you'll be able to see the waves in the drywall a little bit just because they're never perfect substrates. So flat is going to hide as much as possible. We're going to do it in a flat white and it's going to be nice and bright. For the walls, that's where it gets a little bit more, there's some wiggle room where you could go with something like an eggshell or you could go with something like a matte. Typically nowadays, because the paints are improving so much, you can go with a lower sheen paint like a matte on the walls, and it's still going to provide you the washability and the durability that you're going to want from it, but it's going to hide a lot of those imperfections and different things in the drywall that you don't want to see. So typically for walls, I recommend using a matte. So again, it's not a flat, it's a matte. It has about 10 degrees of sheen, so it does have a little bit of sheen, and that's the best of both worlds in my opinion. But in areas like a kitchen or a bathroom, I would maybe recommend bumping it up to an eggshell where you're going to be able to wash them a little bit more. And then when it comes to your trim work, I move up to about a satin sheen. Some people go with a semi-gloss, which is obviously fine as well. But that satin sheen still provides the same washability that the semi-gloss does, but it's not as shiny. And again, it doesn't bring out all those little imperfections that you see with a really high sheen paint.
Okay. And in terms of the actual paint, would you recommend a specialty paint for a kitchen or bathroom in terms of things like being able to prevent mold and things like that?
Yeah, so most of the paints that you're going to be able to go out today and buy have those properties built into it already. That being said, Benjamin Moore does have an amazing product called Aura Bath and Spa that is specifically formulated for those uses. So that's something, if it's within the budget to use that product, you're never going to go wrong with bumping it up to that higher quality, because obviously, your bathrooms and your kitchens, you're going to be cleaning them much more than the other rooms in your house. So yeah, it's definitely not a bad idea to do that.
Okay, great. And so when you're working with realtors, because we have a lot of realtors that will be tuning into our show, how do you work with realtors? How do you collaborate with them in terms of projects?
Yeah, so the main thing I need from the realtor is, I feel like when you talk to your client, you're going to get a certain expectation of, what price point you want to sell the home at, and things like that. So that's the main piece of information we need to get from the realtor is, okay, where is the expectation levels here, and what goals do we have for this property? If I get a clear idea of that from the realtor, then I can move to the homeowner, where from that point, I feel like it's easiest for the realtor and the homeowner if I work directly with the homeowner. That way, the realtor can focus on doing all the other aspects of the sale, or whatever's going on. And I can work directly with that homeowner to iron out all the details of the painting process. But yeah, getting super clear on, if we have this grand idea to sell the house at a little bit of a higher price point, but then we're only going to paint little areas in the house, it's probably going to be difficult to match those two things up. So that's definitely the biggest thing at the beginning of the process, just making sure that we're all on the same page of what the goal is and what's going to need to be done to get us there.
Right. And I think so. An evaluation of the property is, this is the value of the property as it is right now. And this is the value of the property if you do this list of things, so that they understand their ROI, because there's no point in putting in money into the house if you're not going to get your money back out of it. You want to get your money back out of it, and doing these improvements to the house will also make the house sell for more. And we know that even the littlest defect, the buyer thinks, oh my God, something's wrong, and they want to discount it quite substantially. So the less imperfections, if that's what you want to call it, that a home has, then the better the home appears in the eyes of the buyers, the more money they're willing to put down, because they don't have to say, well, I'm going to discount this much to do this and this much to do this. And for the home seller, knowing what the cost in and what the expected cost out is will help them basically say that, yes, this improvement is worth my time of going through the process and my money or investment into it. So that's a great tip as well. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it has to be justified for sure. Like, and that's another part of that process. Like, again, anytime we're working with a situation where they're selling the home, I'm definitely looking at what their goals are. Obviously, I don't have the same market knowledge that you do. So that's something that I would take advice from the realtor in terms of like what we're looking at. And then from there, just making sure that it matches up with the client and their goals.
Right. And I think even for somebody who is looking to live in their home, but they're wanting to do some painting to freshen it up, we all are working within a budget, right? Money is
Absolutely
not limited to any of us. So I think at that point saying, what is the budget that I have? Right. And what can I get done with that budget? So maybe you say, okay, I'm going to do the walls and the trim. The ceiling, we did it a couple of years ago. It looks okay. We don't need to do the ceiling. It's good, right? So having a budget and giving you that budget and what they want to have done, I think you can say, well, this is what we can do with that budget, or, we can't do the ceilings with that budget, or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because for us, we're never going to bring down the quality of the work that we're doing or anything like that. But if we have an idea of the budget, now we can start to look to prioritize and look at the biggest items that we can tackle to be able to maximize the amount of money that they're spending, which is obviously hugely important.
Right. I think everybody starts with this big picture, whether it's looking for a house or looking to decorate a house or looking to improve a house. We want all of these things done. Okay. Same like looking at a house. You want all of these things. Now, what are the things that you have to have done? What are the things that you would like to get done? And then what is your budget? And based on all of those things put together, that's kind of how you'll reach your goal, what's affordable and what's feasible to do as well, right? Awesome.
Absolutely.
This has been so great to talk to you, Arran. Long time coming, but thank you so much for spending some time and chatting with us today. What is the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so obviously on our website at www.hecrapainting.ca, they can access all of our information there. We're obviously on the main social media platform, so we're on Instagram at Hecra Painting and Facebook as well. And obviously they can call me directly anytime at 647-971-2439. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk about paint. It is something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I do love. So, even if they just have basic questions about doing their own project, I'm always happy to talk to them about that.
Okay. And just to confirm, there is no cost or obligation to reach out to you to have a consultation, correct?
Absolutely not. And now that I was thinking about that too, same thing for a real estate agent, right? If they want a little bit of information on, something for their client, they can always feel free to reach out, and my phone's always on.
Right. And for us as well, we do provide a room by room review where we'll go through your house. We'll tell you what you need to do. More importantly, what you don't need to do to be able to sell it for more money and in a faster time frame. And, from that, then you can make your list of what you would like to have done and what you have to have done. And then you can reach out to Arran and put it all together to, have success in your plan. Now, Arran, I have worked with you for quite some time. I've seen your work. I know you have a lot of pictures on your website. I'm sure you're willing to share them. We also put this podcast out in a video format. So maybe on that video format, we will add some of your before and after so people can see some of the amazing work that you do, not only inside, but outside, which really sometimes I'll look at the house and go, that was not great curb appeal, and now it's very inviting, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And it obviously provides a little bit of inspiration and context of what we're talking about when you're able to see those photos and get an idea for, what may be possible for their home as well. So absolutely, I would love to do that.
Right. Okay, great. So again, Hecra Painting, just so if you're wondering how that's spelled, it's Hecra painting.ca. Can you run that number by one more time, Arran?
Yep. So it's 647-971-2439.
Okay. And I'll put all of that contact information in the show notes. I'll also put my contact information and how you can get a free room by room review. Thanks so much, Arran. I really appreciate your time. And until the next podcast, or two, if you enjoyed this podcast, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends. If there's any topics that you would like us to cover in the future, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to do a podcast, especially for you. Thanks so much for tuning in.